ask our interpreter to walk through how to access our interpretation services for today's meeting. Ruth?
Sure, thank you. I will repeat the announcement in English. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, que es el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en celular o tableta, presione los puntos suspensivos, luego Interpretation y luego el idioma. Gracias. To use the Zoom interpreting feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are located. Click on the interpretation icon, which is the world icon, and select English as your language. If you are joining using the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone or tablet, please press the ellipses, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So for a reminder for everyone, and especially for folks who are just sort of now tuning in to the work of this committee, reminding that we were formulated last year to identify solutions to address the housing needs in our region. We all know that these challenges on housing do not pop up overnight, and the solutions are not going to fix everything immediately. But the important thing anchoring our work on this committee is building a regional approach to housing that considers the perspectives of various stakeholders across communities, interests, industries. So far we've had the opportunity to discuss the agency's housing acceleration program and a regional equitable housing framework, which we know is helping set the stage for a comprehensive approach to tackling our housing crisis. So one of the other tasks in our work plan is to discuss the formation of a regional housing finance agency, and I am looking forward to discussing this potential agency today during our meeting. But first up is item number 1, which is non-agenda public and member comments. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We do have one member of the public who wishes to speak. Cathy Rhodes, you are self-muted at the moment. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much. This is Cathy Rhodes, and today I wanted to tell you the story of how the Veterans Administration Supportive Housing HUD-VASH vouchers for homeless veterans idea came into being right here in San Diego. In the early 2000s, HUD created a new goal of ending chronic homelessness by 2015 with new housing vouchers. In 2017, I came up with the idea of changing HUD's goal to ending chronic homelessness by 2015 to a new HUD goal of ending chronic and veterans homeless by 2015 and using new federal Veterans Administration funding stream for the new homeless veteran housing voucher program. I made the rounds of non-agenda public comment and presented my ideas to change HUD goals, but no one bit. Then after President Obama was elected in November 2008, First Lady-elect Michelle Obama stated as part of her platform as First Lady, she wanted to work with veterans, families, and homeless veterans. After I heard this, I made the rounds again and added that First Lady Michelle Obama should lead the effort. As always, everybody just rolled their eyes, said I was dreaming, said I would never be able to get Michelle Obama to endorse my pie in the sky idea to change HUD goals because it would require a new act of Congress. I had no political backing and it was just me alone. Undeterred, instead of trying to get help locally, I just concentrated on getting meetings and lobbying federal HUD and Veterans Affairs officials, Congress members, Senator staff to change HUD's goals to include veterans as a new priority. After President Obama was sworn in 2009, I just happened to be watching C-SPAN on TV. First Lady Michelle Obama was going to have one of her first press conference. It could have even been her first, and it included HUD and Veterans Affairs Administration officials. I was intrigued. First Lady Michelle Obama opened her speech by saying President Obama is changing HUD's goal of ending chronic homelessness by 2015 to a new HUD goal of ending chronic and veterans homelessness by 2015 with associated new funding awards from the Veterans Administration. I couldn't believe it. Michelle Obama used my elevator speech. Dreams can come true. All it took was an addition of 2 small words into a HUD goal, and a new federal source of funding was open for all homeless veterans. as of 2020, a total of 105,000 housing vouchers have been issued in the United States, with almost 2,300 in the San Diego region. So that's just a story of how the HUD vouchers came to be for homeless veterans, and it reduced homeless veterans by a huge amount. I think maybe even like 50%. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any additional public comments?
No, Chair, that's all the public comments.
Great. So now I'll turn over to any member comments that are non-agendized. Okay, seeing none. Next up is item 2, approval of meeting minutes. Are there any public comments on this item? Francesca?
Chair, having some technical difficulties. No, there are no public comments on this item.
Okay, are there any member comments?
No, Sotelo Solis moved to approve, and I'm sorry you can't see me. My front camera is not working. So I did it on my rear camera. It recognizes my background, but you can't see me. So I'm here. I love you all, but I moved to approve.
Thank you. Thank you both. We have a motion and a second. Do we have a vote?
Thank you, Chair. I'll go ahead and call roll for the vote. The Vice Chair Todd Gloria is absent. City of San Diego Council Member Joe LaCava is also absent. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of La Mesa, Council Member Shu.
Aye.
For the City of Solana Beach, Mayor Huebner.
Yes.
And for the City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. And that does pass unanimously with those members present.
Great. Okay. So last meeting, we had a great and really robust discussion. And we also briefly discussed Senate Bill 1105 that was introduced by Senator Hueso earlier this year. And Senator Hueso continues to be very interested and eager for feedback and comments that come from this subcommittee, but also from the group of interested stakeholders who are part of the task force. I think Senator Hueso wants to really make sure that what Bill 1105 represents is very much something we locally own, and is really representative of what we all share as our top priorities for the Regional Housing Finance Authority. So therefore, we are going to spend some time today digging into one important part of the legislation, which is the programmatic criteria for of how funds would be distributed. And what kind of projects would be built. And I am going to assist with parts of the discussion today, but Jennifer Lassar, a consultant for SANDAG, will be helping to present and facilitate. And before we jump into that, Allison Wood from SANDAG will get us started with this item. And for members of the public, we're going to take public comments after the presentation and member discussion. So Allison and Jennifer, please take it away.
Great, thank you so much. So I have just a couple slides here to introduce this item, and we're very excited to hear the discussion today. So we can go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so I'll quickly, turn it over to others on the team here, but just wanted to emphasize that here at SANDAG, we're helping to really facilitate this process and gather input from the task force and bring it to the subcommittee. We're going to start with a rundown of the legislative process for SB 1105, and Jeffrey Yuen from the Supervisor's Office will provide that overview. And then I'll describe a bit about how we're coordinating with the task force and some of the meetings we have planned with them to gather their input. And then we'll quickly dive into the Regional Housing Finance Agency discussion and share some of the feedback we've received from the Housing Task Force to date. Next slide. Wanted to quickly introduce our facilitation team. We have the Lassar Development Consultants on board assisting us at SANDAG with this process. So you'll see Jennifer Lassar today, and she's joined, with her team, Stacy and Helmi, who've been really helpful in providing their subject matter expertise and helping us in facilitating these meetings and gathering input. Okay, so I'll quickly hand it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Allison. So I just wanted to provide a quick update. I think we mentioned this last time, but helpful to refresh that there's basically two processes that are happening in parallel right now, concurrently. So Senator Hueso has authored SB 1105 and is moving that through Sacramento through the state process. You can see here it passed through Senate Housing Committee, then it passed through Senate Government Finance, and now it's teeing up for a vote at the Senate floor in the coming weeks. And should that happen, then it'll flip to the Assembly side sometime in June. At the same time, we have this process running locally with this subcommittee here and supported by a task force, which I think Allison will get into in another slide, that is working locally, because Senator Hueso has made it clear that he really wants to hear local input, guidance, feedback to make sure this is the best version it can be, and one that folks locally feel comfortable with, and one that we feel good about. So that's the update. Just want to make sure it's clear that we have both processes working at the same time, and Senator Hueso is really committed to working and hearing the feedback from this group locally.
Great. So here's just a quick overview on the Housing Task Force. We can go to the next slide. We wanted to share the list of organizations that are participating in the task force. So you can see up on your screen a wide variety of perspectives that we're bringing to the table, from building trades, nonprofits, development, community. So we're getting a lot of diverse perspectives and feel that this really complements some of our other forums, such as our working groups that we have at SANDAG. This is a different set of individuals, and we're really getting some good feedback from this group. So next slide. So here's an overview of the proposed schedule and how we're planning to engage the task force and bring items to the subcommittee throughout. So we have three main topics that we're looking to cover in these meetings. So the first is programmatic criteria that we'll focus on today. The second would be governance. And then the third would be revenues. And so we've met with the task force. We've had discussion on programmatic criteria. You'll hear feedback from that discussion throughout the presentation today. We didn't get through all of the programmatic criteria, so we're going to continue that discussion in the next meeting with the task force on May 9th. And then we'll meet with the task force again to talk about governance. And then we'll bring that information to you at your next subcommittee meeting, May 18th. And then we'll cover revenues with the housing task force, and again, bring that information to the following subcommittee meeting. So at each of your future meetings, we'll continue to bring you the input that we're hearing from the task force. And if there are particular questions or things that we should dig into more with the task force, we can, welcome that input from you all today as well. Okay. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer Lassar to get into our discussion.
Thank you, Allison, and good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to start with the framework that we're using at the task force level to vet various pieces of the bill. And it's a framework I hope some of you are familiar with. It's called the Gradients of Agreement. And it's for a long time been a best practice in group decision making. It was pioneered by Sam Kainer and Community at Work, and it's used in various formats pretty widely. So instead, and I'll show you the chart on the next page, but instead of a simple yes/no vote, it allows participants to register incremental levels of agreement using basically a stoplight system from green to yellow to red. And it's designed to explicitly acknowledge that yes doesn't mean the same thing to every person, hence the gradients of levels of support or discomfort. And it was originally an 8-level voting scale, but I have used it as a 5-level voting scale. We used it in CASA, in the CASA process in the Bay Area, with 2 groups totaling 80 people. We used it again last summer in Los Angeles with local stakeholders there around the Comlogger bill, which is very similar to this, but localized to Los Angeles. So Stacy, let's go to the next slide. So I just want to show you what the 5 levels mean, and we're not using it here today. I want you to know that, but we are going to be sharing the results of the task force as expressed through this tool. So 1 means strongly agree. I'm pleased and fully support the decision. 2 means agree with reservations. I'm mostly satisfied and I can support it. 3 is I'm going to either abstain or be neutral. I'm going to go along with the will of the group. 4, I disagree, but I'm willing to go along, meaning really that I have serious reservations, but respect that we're focused on the regional needs and compromising where needed for the greater good. And I think this is really important in all regional and multi-stakeholder processes of having a way to express disagreement without actually explicitly voting no. And then 5 is I strongly disagree and I object to the decision. So what we really hope to see is votes that are in the 1s and 2s, at least 1s, 2s, and 3s. If we see a lot of 4s, we know that we are starting to be in uneasy territory. And I think you'll see a good mix of how this played out with our workforce group. So the first thing we did with the task force was actually ask them about their comfort for using this tool. So it was our very first thing out of the gate. Throughout our meeting, we had a range of 15 to 17 voters, 1 voter or one voting member per organization. So you can see here, 71% of the task force members strongly agreed, to 17% with reservations and 13% neutral. So that was probably about 1 or 2 people at a 3, 1 or 2 people at a 2, and the rest at all at 1. So just before we go any further, anybody have any questions or comments on this system? Okay. And I'll just invite you to jump.
I do, Jennifer,
Yes.
really quick, if I could, through the chair.
Yes, please.
I just want to get the go ahead from our chair and then I'll go ahead and ask you.
Chair
That's very
Lost-Kramer, is it
polite of
okay?
you.
Is it okay to take comments?
Continue. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me give
Thank you so much,
a
Chair.
blanket permission for comments and questions throughout the presentation.
Outstanding. All right. Jennifer, my question is, were the way people could vote, was it kind of like we do at the board where everybody has a clicker and they chime in their vote like at the same time and it's silent and it's anonymous until it goes up on the board, or is it everybody voices their opinion? So how did this first question get asked?
Excellent question. We used polling. It was confidential to the group, although we could see the results to make sure we knew that there weren't duplicative voters. But it is organic. You see it live, so you see it unfolding. And generally, I sit for 1 or 2 minutes when it slows down to provide space and kind of give people, a sort of a 60 to second kind of, we're going to wrap it up soon. And because we knew how many voters we had, we knew that when we got close to 15 each time that was probably what we were going to get.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet. And Chairwoman, thank you for the opportunity for everybody to just jump in with questions, and I welcome that, and I'll make sure I can see the chat as well. Okay, so we're going to jump into the content, and I put up the outline here, and I just want to sort of tell you what we're going to go through and then how we're going to do it. So we're going to really go through today the programmatic criteria. There's actually quite a lot. And we're going to go through sort of 3 topical areas within that. 1 are the eligible uses of revenue. The second are the local and regional allocations. So what the proposed splits are. And then within those splits, what are the allocation of uses at the regional level and the local level? They're a little different. And then we're going to go through at the end the program parameters. So affordability levels, livability, and sustainability. And I'm going to open up each of these and then provide the opportunity for our chairwoman and Jeff Yoon to provide some additional context. And then I'm going to share with you the gradients of agreement vote, and then a slide on the feedback of the task force. And then we're going to come back to you for your discussion on each one. So it's a little cumbersome, but I just kind of want to give you the roadmap there. And so if it's okay, we'll start with the eligible uses of revenue. And if the process isn't feeling right, please jump in and we'll adapt. So the revenue, again, this isn't where the revenue comes from. That is the final thing that we'll be dealing with later on, a few weeks out. But this is about what the revenue would be able to be used for. It would support construction and preservation of equitable and environmentally friendly affordable housing, rental and tenant protection programs, planning, research, and data collection, and technical assistance related to equitable housing. And Chairwoman and Jeff, I want to just give you a moment here to provide a little of your context around the thinking in your work with Senator Hueso.
Sure. I'll say a couple of words, and then Jeff can add. I think there's been a lot of voices who've been part of this, and some of the folks are here in this meeting, and then there's all the stakeholders that were in the stakeholder meeting. I think that what I'm hearing, and I support as well, is the need to really foreground not just housing, but housing in the right places. Number one, and number two, that really takes into environmental health and safe and healthy environments in our communities into account, and really puts that front and center in terms of the construction and preservation, and in addition to the construction and preservation side, that we also need to be looking at tenant protection programs. It's not just building more homes, but sort of helping folks stay in the homes they live in, and then there is a need as well to support, especially some of our smaller jurisdictions, with technical assistance and planning. I just want to uplift. I had a great conversation with someone on the call today. It was hopefully, Lisa, I can just go ahead and share your great leadership and thoughts. Really thinking about ADUs and how does that play into Solana Beach's strategy, and that there is probably some role that this group could play in sort of supporting some of our smaller jurisdictions to do more innovative programs. And then the last is in the technical assistance bucket, which is of course related to the planning and data. So Jeff, is there anything you think I missed there that you want to add that we've really heard? That's great. Nothing to add. Okay. Great.
Thank you. So let's see what the task force said about this. 29% strongly agree, and 71% agree with reservations. So in my experience, this is kind of a very strong showing, especially fresh out of the gate the very first time around. It's kind of what you want to see. And then at this point, we realized we should take capture reservations, but we didn't do it for this one. But subsequent items, we'll have a slide for you on the reservations. So just want to so I want to stop there and go back to the slide then and open it up for your thoughts on these uses.
So why don't we just take, I see Lisa's hand up. So Mayor Huebner.
Yeah, I just went, when we were talking about the construction of affordable housing, is it with using inclusionary percentages, or are you anticipating this is only 100% affordable projects, or what?
Mayor, go ahead, Supervisor.
I was just saying both and, I think that the idea here is to put these as programmatic criteria, but then the implementation obviously is going to be up to this SD REEF authority as it comes online.
Okay.
I see Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Mayor Solis.
All right. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you so much, Jennifer. My question is, when we start adding in, and I know in the previous slide you mentioned ADUs and the construction of, and right now even our chair mentioned it, ADU construction, do ADUs count towards RHNA numbers?
My understanding is yes, but I feel like I should defer that to a more expert person. So If Tuari, if you're on the call.
Allison, it would be you today.
Yeah, Tuari's not here today. I know there's a lot of nuance around that, so I don't want to answer and give the wrong response, but that's something we can bring back.
Okay, and the reason I bring it up is, again, if we are to, dedicate a good portion, or even it be part of the platform, there's already legislation and things that are out there that are, we don't want granny towers, in certain neighborhoods, and, or certain things that are happening. And I don't want it to become that focus. I want it to really nuance going back to basics. Why would we want to build this type of unit? What would be the benefits? What are some of the parking requirements? And what are other neighborhoods and other densely populated communities using to offset, no parking for their additional ADUs, or even using one lot for multi housing? So as we start talking about, that technical assistance related to equitable housing, I would love to see and hear how legislation, one that is soon to be, or maybe it's in the kitty right now, it's getting cooked up and ready to roll, to when we think, and whether or not it'll be a funded or unfunded mandate. Most of it'll probably be unfunded, but whether or not it applies to us. So I think that last bullet point at the technical assistance, I think, is essential, but it needs to be also to something that, the cities can really chomp into and see how it'll affect us currently, in the hypothetical, but then in the future, and if it'll have money as well. And the technical assistance, my last question is, does that also apply to funding a person or a staff person at a municipality? Was a thought at all put in that kind of framework?
I'll just answer that quickly. Just to the best of my knowledge, no one suggested that. I think that's no reason not to, right? If that's the best way to do technical assistance. I think that right now, what is kind of outlined here is so broad that it could be purposed in that way, sort of up to the SD REEF board at the end of the day, like how they want to allocate the budget, as long as it sort of meets these program criteria.
Yeah, because I think as we talk about the funding and just the programmatic aspect of it, we each have our housing staff, and we have a director and then their team. And because legislation is constantly moving, and that we have people that hear on TV, oh, there's a ministerial plans that you can approve and I can get my ADU done with tomorrow. And it's like, no, that was Encinitas, or that was another community. But if I had somebody dedicated at the counter to help my constituents, and I'm sure it applies across the board to our constituents for my colleagues, I think it would make a difference. So technical assistance, not just, hey, this is what it is, but an actual person. And maybe it would just be for a RENA cycle or a portion of the RENA cycle. I think that's essential. So that's my question for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, even if it's not a question?
So I see Jack, Councilmember Shu, and Mayor Huebner. Chair, I do wonder, I'm curious if you think that the 10% admin money in the local and regional pots might be used for staffing, in reference to Mayor Sotelo Solis's question.
I mean, in answering that, I think sounds good to me. I mean, I think there's so much of this that's gonna, in the end of the day, be decided in terms of the budget by the SD REEF board, as well as potentially circumscribed or targeted by any kind of ballot measure that would need to be brought in order to fund this agency. So I think what we kind of need to do is just write program criteria that outline the broad buckets, like acknowledging that those kinds of detailed questions will frankly be decided later. But I personally, I would be supportive of it if I ended up being on the board at the time. Councilmember Shu.
Sure. Just on that one note, I think up to 10% is good. 10% is typically high for administration, but I think for this particular case, it's important. What was timely earlier today was I attended a webinar by the HEAL Network, homeless network here in San Diego, and I learned some interesting information, particularly in terms of what we're falling short on in terms of available housing, and the category of very, very low income level. In other words, people who can only afford $600 a month in terms of rent, not the $1,800 or some other high number, which is closer to average. And it doesn't, to me, it doesn't even show up in RENA, because in RENA, when we deal with low income and very low income, that's still far above this category that we're extremely short on in terms of available housing. So when we address the term equity, I want to make sure we understand what equitable means. It does not divide everything equally. It means putting money where we need it. And in this category, it's needed sooner rather than later, and we need a lot of it. And it's extremely difficult to develop that kind of housing. To get a developer to say you can only charge $600 a month rent, and we want you to make it happen, and that we want all the amenities that go with it to go as well, which means environmentally friendly, that there's playgrounds within this housing development, and those kinds of things. So I hope we have a clear mind of where we're headed, and that we know that we're not going to divide it equally. If the need is 80% in that very, very low category, 80% of the funding and effort needs to go in that category. To me, that's how we can help. Otherwise, the homeless situation that we are under is going to continue, and that we need to make sure we get the aid to the most in need first. And I would also leave the door open so that technical assistance means that you could farm it out to a local nonprofit. That in this particular webinar I was at, there was horror story after horror story, how government, the agencies that were supposed to relieve these problems, were actually impeding and causing more harm to the homeless population, to those who needed the housing, because of our own structure and restrictions in terms of who is eligible for housing and what the criteria was like. So the agencies and the government agencies that were having to provide aid to these populations were actually not doing as much as they could have in terms of helping these populations. So I hope we do provide not only an outcome measure, but to make sure that the system does really help the population we need. And I think if we discuss this early on, we know this is where we're headed. And if possible, we could put it into the legislation in some way.
Thank you. I think we have some conversations that, Jennifer, let me know if I'm wrong, but I think was some conversations around funding allocations as well that we'll talk about, right?
Yes, correct.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Councilmember Shu. And did Mayor Huebner, did you have an additional comment?
I do. I'll be quick because we're barely through this. Regarding the ADUs, and for Alejandra, the beach culture really lends itself to ADUs. And so we're very interested in ADUs, and in our housing element, we are able to count in our planning efforts on a certain percentage of what we produced in the past. Yet if we exceed that in production, and this is deed restricted, and those that aren't deed restricted but at a lower rate of rent can be counted as moderate or even above market, which we can still count, then they can be counted. But in terms of the ADU towers, et cetera, I'm completely in agreement for them to be disrupting, neighborhoods. It's different for many people who simply just want to turn a profit. It's difficult to watch that occur. And so hopefully, given that this whole financing agency is going to be San Diego oriented, that we would be able to put in things that each of our cities would like to see. For instance, currently our ADU ordinance is at 16 feet high, and that helps to keep with the community being willing and acceptable of many ADUs in our community. So there are a lot of different components to each of our cities, what would be acceptable and not acceptable, what would work financially and not work financially. So again, I really appreciate the approach that this is going to be focused on San Diego's unique character.
Great. Okay, thank you. Let's go on to the next slide.
Stacy? So the next, so we talked about what the money can be used on, and this is about where it can be used. And I just want to emphasize the blue at the bottom. All jurisdictions are eligible for an allocation, so all cities and the county of San Diego. Then let's go on to the next slide. And so here is the proposed split of revenues between local jurisdictions and regional jurisdictions. And we'll look at the polling results from that and the comments. But again, Chairwoman, do you want to just provide a little thought on the framing of 50-50?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, this is something I'm really excited about. I think it's a really good idea because I think it strikes the right balance between giving all of our jurisdictions, especially our cities, hopefully like a big revenue source to support projects that make sense locally in everyone's own communities and that are like appropriately designed. And I know this is something I've talked to a lot of the mayors in my district about, of wanting to do things and wanting to do more, but not having the revenue sources available, but really having sort of good pulse of what makes sense in each community, and being able to design appropriate projects that align with sort of like community character. So I think that's great and really exciting and would be a huge help, like a massive help just to, I think, all of our jurisdictions. But on the other side of things is like, we also know that we're an integrated region. We're not just like a collection of jurisdictions, we're actually an integrated regional economy. And it certainly makes sense to sort of think regionally and strategically about where projects make sense from the perspective of regional job markets and regional transit networks, and that there might be kind of high-level regional support, strategigic investments that make more sense in, say, the city of San Diego than maybe in Solana Beach, and that you would want to potentially might be able to build sort of more units in the city of San Diego than in the city of Solana Beach. So you might want to target more of your investments into the city of San Diego because that's where more units could be built. So I think it really strikes a nice balance between helping all of our jurisdictions meet their RHNA obligations while also really providing a huge resource to think holistically, regionally, and strategically about like where are the right places to be building housing, given sort of the structure of transportation, transit, jobs, and commutes in our county. So that's the thinking behind it. Wish I could take credit. I did not think of it, but whoever suggested, I thought they were really smart. I don't remember who it was now, but I think that was the context.
So let's take a look at the gradients from the task force and their comments, and then we'll come back to this item for your discussion. So again, seeing a distribution across 1s, 2s, and 3s, a little more at about 40% at the 1s and about 30% at the 2s and 3s. So a consistent support. And then let's go to the comments that they made. It said comments that, the split seems simplistic because at this point we hadn't dug into it, which we will do with you as well. Wondered what the basis of it was. Probably the biggest area of comments were really around a concern that the tribal nations weren't included in the eligibility. And a thought that if they were, it would be a good way to help bring state tribal housing dollars to our region. But also SANDAG, expressed the need to have further analysis and outreach on including the tribal nations because it's complex. They don't have RENA allocations, and they're exempt from paying into a lot of the contemplated revenue streams. And so we sort of left it at that. And Stacy, if we can just go back to the split then, and Chairwoman, open it up for discussion. So discussion on this. Oh, there's Mayor Todd Gloria. Welcome, Mayor. Nice to see you.
Hello, Ms. Lassar. Good to see you. I've been listening. Forgive me, I was just throwing down my lunch really quickly as they've overbooked as usual. On this matter, first off, on the tribal stuff, have we done any outreach to the tribal communities?
Allison?
We've met with our tribal working group on our housing program in general, and there are resources from the state, existing funding sources through the REAP program that we're coordinating with them on. But on this SB 1105 specifically and their eligibility, we have not brought that to them yet.
Okay. I mean, sovereignty is important, right? And so and understanding that relationship and respecting it would be important to this committee member. I imagine that's true for others. On this split, with regard to the local jurisdiction bucket, is there a criteria that would have to be achieved in order to participate in that funding, or is it just a hard and fast 50% of the dollars will go to local jurisdictions?
My understanding, and Jen, correct me if you don't have the same understanding, but my understanding is that it's just 50%, but it can only be spent on projects that meet the overall program criteria. So there, like there a whole set of program criteria about what kind of projects get funded. So the projects would have to meet the program criteria, but as long as the projects meet the program criteria, then jurisdictions would be eligible.
Okay, so it'd be applying as a project specific, not as a city for. I don't know how I would say it, but like the jurisdiction is based on the project being in a particular community, not the city of San Diego requesting funding.
Cities would, yeah, the county and the cities would actually get allocations based on the RENA numbers. And so, and we're going to go through these two buckets because the distribution of funds are a little different for local jurisdictions versus the regional pot. And when we get to governance, which is a future meeting, we'll have some discussions there around performance and when the money might come back into the regional pot, and also the ability of local governments, if they chose, to put some of their money back into the regional pot.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Am I here? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chair. Good to see you, Mayor Gloria. And so my question is, what are the percentages in other, regional funding agencies, and kind of what is their breakdown?
Perhaps I could take that one, Jennifer.
Yes.
Hi, Mayor. Thanks for that question. So in the Bay Area, I was just checking up on their ledge. They're at 50-50 as well, regional and local. And the LA effort is, it's mostly 70-30, 70% to local jurisdictions, although it varies a little bit depending on the production and preservation, the different types of buckets, but generally it's 70-30.
And the reason I ask is a 50-50 split seems even and equal. However, when we talk about equity and we look at who is actually building, it is, and who is held accountable to the RENA numbers, it is the jurisdictions. It's each one of us that has to meet our RENA numbers, or we get the no, you didn't get there. There could be the implication, or the repercussions, should I say, of not reaching that. So I would actually be open to going up to a 70-30 split, and seeing what that would mean. Again, to the point that was made earlier, it's based off of projects, but yet also to RENA allocation. So it's this, really wonky equation, but we went through a wonky equation to get to our RENA numbers. And if it's going to incentivize people to get to reaching those numbers, then I'd rather see more of the resources go to the communities and the people that are stepping up. And we know when we put our money where our mouth is, that's when people are really incentivized to say, hey, maybe I can make it out. Maybe I can pencil it out. So I'd be, open and would love to hear what the, opportunities would be to be at a 70-30 split, even open to further conversations. But I think a 30% for the regional agency, we could still, qualify potentially for, additional grants, kind of like we're doing now. But I think it would, around the table, what I've heard is it doesn't pencil out, or there's not enough incentive, or this, for whatever reason. I think if there are more resources, somehow things will not magically come to a happy ending, but I think that it'll incentivize it and the developers to get out there. So I would love to hear a report back on a 70-30 split. Thank you.
And we're going to go through, and I realize this is a little awkward. We're going to actually go through each bucket in the sort of the detail and the focus. And I know you all want to speak, and I just want to share one thing that'll be helpful framing. You are all here with two hats, right? You're here with your regional hat and what's good as a regional thinker. And then you're here with your local government hat. And for those of you from the small cities, I know housing is even harder. The thing that we have in the regional pot is a 15% kind of innovation fund. So to Council Member Shu's comment about equity, right? Or this idea that in a Solana Beach or a Del Mar or even a La Mesa, you may need more money than your share. That innovation fund can be shared around in different ways. And so I want to really let you all register your comments, but you're going to have that opportunity, I think, to think about where do you want more flexibility if you're a small jurisdiction, or especially thinking about equity. And that's your policy call, but you're going to have that opportunity as we go through these to really to bat that around. Chairwoman, I see you have a long lineup of speakers who want to talk.
Yes, Councilmember Shu.
Thank you. I know you may talk about how you're going to split up the 50%, or whatever division here. So typically when funding goes to jurisdictions, it's done on a per capita basis, and they just divide, right, on a per capita basis. And in this case, if you're using RENA numbers, my concern is the RENA allocations to cities may not be a good indicator of what the needs really are and where the difficulties are. So we have jurisdictions in which the average income is rather high, yet the RENA numbers are also very high, which means they certainly do have needs for a low and very low income housing, but the community itself is not hurting as much as some other parts of our region. So I have some concerns with regards to how the how we split this money. If the regional money can be used specifically in those areas that have the most amount of need, and we deal with the equity question through the regional number and allocation, to me, that would be one way to deal with this issue, and then come up with this straight formula for the local jurisdictions. On the other hand, I would go with a different kind of allocation on a per capita basis or something like that. I really question whether the RENA numbers are a really good indicator of need and the best use of this money if we really want to deal with equity. Because given the numbers I've seen per city, those numbers were derived by a formula from the state, which we had to do, which I don't know what was the origin of that thinking when they came up with those numbers. I think they were dealing with fairness of cities and everything else. I don't know if housing need and equity was that much of a criteria when those RENA numbers were first developed. So by locking us into a RENA number allocation, I think puts us into a continuation of something no better than a straight per capita allocation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Mayor Gloria, I think you had another comment. Okay, I think he's put his, Mayor Gloria, if you put your hand down, I think we will move on to the next slide.
Oh, I had my hand up.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No worries. So yeah, one of the things that I'm really liking about this whole concept is that it is taking a look at this differently and that we're looking at it regionally. I recall the Director of Office of Planning and Research coming to Sandag and pointing out how important it was for us to develop housing at employment centers. And I think that that is where the regional pot comes in, right? So it will go eventually to a city, but a city with an employment center, something like Carlsbad or something like San Diego, or other areas that have you know, a university or a hospital or a headquarters or whatever. And so I don't think we should forget that the money that goes into regional, from my understanding, and I'm looking forward to the breakdown more, that it is going to go to a city, but looking at it from that regional lens versus looking at it from the local jurisdiction lens. Maybe one way to do this is that there's no break between local jurisdictions and regional, it's just 100%, but the criteria has to do with the regional, et cetera. So again, this is just brainstorming, and I'm open to all sorts of ideas. But again, I like to emphasize that I really like the idea of a regional approach to this.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayor Huebner. Seeing no other hands, we will go to the next slide.
Hey, so we're going to get into the local criteria now, and we're going to start with looking at the sort of the information within the local bucket and then in the regional bucket. So the local allocation is proposed to be based on each jurisdiction's share of very low income, and moderate income units in the most recent RENA. And a local jurisdiction may request the agency to administer all or a portion of the allocated fund and develop an annual expenditure plan in consultation with the local jurisdiction. And I think this is really trying to reflect the sensitivity that particularly small cities don't have a lot of staff capacity. And you may want to choose to do some of the parts that are proposed and not others. So just want you to know that that flexibility is there. Chairwoman, do you want to? So let me go through the details then, and Chairwoman.
Yeah, I think you should go ahead because I'm
Okay,
sure
great.
everyone's going to have lots of comments and questions. So
Okay,
let's get
great.
it all out there.
Yeah. So let's go to this one. So the focus here is really at the local jurisdiction level. It's the second line that the minimum of 60% of the funds will be for housing production. A max of 10 for admin and operations. That's true in the regional bucket as well. A minimum of 15% for preservation, 5% for tenant and rental protection programs. And this is one of those areas, you know, that you might be more inclined to give back to the regional pot because it can be administratively cumbersome. And an overlay, right, between production and preservation of 10 to 35% focused on first-time home buyer programs and opportunities for households at or below 20%. So programs and opportunities means a combination of capital, sort of soft mortgage, right, assistance, as well as first-time home buyer education programs. So that's the context. Chairwoman, do you want to add more on context, or and then I can share the comments and the results? You're on mute.
Oh, there. Yeah, I think what I appreciate about this is that these are minimums. So there's an kind of a clarifying that there will be investments in all these categories, but they're not maximum. So there's still a lot of flexibility. You could end up doing quite a bit more in rental and tenant, more on equitable housing preservation. So I like the kind of, I really like that it reflects and being true to the four purposes that were outlined initially in terms of, you know, what this is going to be targeted towards. but it doesn't get too prescriptive and it still allows a lot of flexibility. So I think it really strikes a nice balance. And then I think the overlay is interesting, right? Because it's basically saying, in addition to these distributions, let's make sure at least 10% of the funds, but not more than 35%, are supporting first-time home buyers. And I know that in my conversations with stakeholders, kind of the lack of first-time home buyer programs came up over and over and over and over again, that just doesn't exist. And I thought that was a great addition. So those are my comments.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead? Yeah.
Let me just present real quick the gradients and the comments. We'll come back to you for discussion. So the gradients, you can see it here, but very strong, 20% almost on strongly agree and 63% on agree with reservations, and the remainder neutral or abstaining. Again, we think this is a very typical strong indication at this early stage. And the comments received, slide, thank you. Okay, just wanting to understand how the allocations will be based on RENA wanting flexibility since the cities don't all have the same housing needs. So thinking about how we have more flexibility, there is 10% flexibility in that stack. It only adds to 90%. And then comments on the home buyer program, the overlay. One, incredibly strong comments that we recognize the need to go to 120%. And we had, the former Habitat CEO, the current Habitat CEO, and the San Diego Foundation home buyer program person there. So a lot of enthusiasm for that, but also a little bit of concern that we might need to go above 120%. But it was not too many voices, mostly just a lot of happiness to see it included. And let's go back to the slide for discussion.
Great. So I'm sure there's a lot of thoughts on this. So anyone have opinions or questions or? Mayor Sotelo-Solis.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Wow, interesting, huh? I really like the first-time homeownership program and opportunities. Yes, yes, yes. And like Supervisor Lawson Remer, we hear that a lot. People are getting priced out. People, just don't have the opportunity or don't know that many jurisdictions have first-time home buyer programs. It's interesting that the rental and tenant protection programs it's at a minimum of 5%. We have a 70-30 split renters to homeowners. So, it would be really interesting to see when we talk about these protection programs, what specifically we are talking about. Can you share a little bit more light there, Jennifer, if we could, through the chair, or Jeff?
Yep, or Jeff, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I could take that one, Mayor. I mean, I think we're thinking of a broad range of types of programs and supports. Some of it that does exist, and some of it that probably needs to be amplified regionally. So things like tenant legal services, but also tenant education, kind of pre-eviction interventions, kind of know your rights campaigns. It could include rental assistance. So there's a whole suite of different programs. Mediation comes to mind, where if intervening at the early stages can help both protect tenants and protect landlords and put them in a better place. And there's, there are some programs here in San Diego, but frankly, they're quite small and nascent compared to other regions across the state.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I definitely see the education program being part of it, but the rental assistance, as we've seen through COVID-19, although the programs did exist, there's still millions of dollars that are still in the in the pots of money to help, because not enough people either knew about it. And even with the marketing and everything going out now, I think there's still a need for that empowerment, that engagement, that this money you are eligible for it, and this is the process. So I think that rental and tenant protections, I think, is essential. And then just the equitable housing preservation, again, it goes to the rental and tenant protections. You know, when you have housing that's over 50 years old, and in our situation over 130 years old, there are a lot of elements that go into how organizations, and I'm not just talking the ones that are on the historical roll, I'm just saying people want to improve their homes, but don't necessarily, again, know where. And so for this equitable housing preservation, would we be talking about construction loans, home improvement loans, or what are we thinking would be offered in that bucket of equitable housing preservation?
So I could take that one too. I think, as Jennifer mentioned earlier, this would be allocated to jurisdictions to administer. So, you know, there would be, we'll see, you know, the final SDREF would have to, you know, develop the final program guidelines, but I think the intent is there would be enough flexibility that jurisdictions could think about, you know, tailoring it to their types of needs. If you have an older housing stock in your city, for instance, that might be a really good way to focus it. But I think it would also be about more traditional preservation, you know, like taking apartments that are, you know, being at risk of being sold and being able to put them back into another deed restricted preservation program to lock in that affordability for another 30 or 50 or whatever, how many years. That type of transaction would be another one that'd be contemplated. And there's a slide at the end of the deck that gets into like what types of products. And I think at this point, we want to keep it kitchen sink, everything. Could be loans, you know, could be, you know, different types of financing mechanisms. I think at this point, we're really just trying to keep it flexible.
Great. And whenever we can keep admin at a max, I think that's good. And then just lastly, the equitable housing production. I think that we should, you know, once we get to that slide, set a bar, a minimum of what people will be have to build in order to be eligible. Like there's no way around it in order to have that percentage. You know, so they need to, they didn't help meet the needs. Because there was one part of the, can you go to the next slide, Jennifer, or whoever it was? Because what the comment was.
Stacey, go to the comment slide, please, Stacey. Thank you.
It says, need flexibility with allocation percentages since not all cities have the same housing need. I think we all have housing need. It may or may not be just the number is different, but the housing needs are there. And it's interesting that our content experts, you know, they brought out that point, but the emphasis still is not, it's more flexibility as opposed to the stick, you know, it's more carrot than it is stick. And I'd rather be, you know, if we can start being more rigid, or else we're not gonna reach our goals. So yes, flexibility to some point, but we need to, if this is gonna be our way of doing it, we need to set it and yes, be hard and fast. This is what you need to be able to do. So I appreciated the comment, but that was being too nice, I think, from our content experts. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Other thoughts before we move on?
I think Mayor Huebner has her hand up, followed by Councilwoman Shu.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind going back to the previous slide, that would be great. I actually appreciate the flexibility of this that one, yeah, very much, because I know, for instance, unfortunately, in many coastal cities, I'm not sure how easy it is for first-time home buyers to actually buy in. So that's sort of an overlay. We would prefer to go into equitable housing preservation or equitable housing production. So I appreciate the minimums and the flexibility so that each jurisdiction can go about it their own way. This is one of the things that I was talking to Supervisor Lawson-Remer about, for instance, for us in the equitable housing production. I was brainstorming this with a local developer, and that is, what if we were able to give grants to homeowners who were thinking about building and deed restricting an ADU, but weren't going to do it because perhaps they didn't want to go get the loan, or they didn't have the ability to get the loan or whatever. But what if we were to give from this money, give them a grant and say, for this grant, you deed restrict it to low or very low and for X number of years. And then we'll finally be able to have that sort of family live within our community. So those are just some of the more creative ideas that I'm hoping that we'll be able to use these dollars for, so that each city can reach that equitable housing goal.
Thank you, Mayor Huebner. Councilmember Shu?
So first, for clarification, minimum in this chart means that with this allocation, they have to fund at least 60% for equitable housing production, 15% for equitable housing preservation, and 5% for program. Is that correct? So out of whatever the pot is, that is the minimum they have to spend?
That's right. That's the exact right. And you can spend more than that. So like, for example,
Right there,
you could do
well, you
25%.
actually, you don't have much more left, because if you add that up, that's 80%. Well, right, 60, 15 plus 5 is 80%. So you only have flexibility of the remaining 20%. So to me, that's a bit of a concern. That's not a lot of flexibility, because if you already mandated 80% of the funds, you only have 20% to work with, and some of that goes towards administration. So of the 3 pots of money there, and then you add this home buyer program, which I'm not understanding what overlay means. Does that mean the home buyers program is part of the equitable housing preservation, or part of the equitable housing production?
That's right. That's exactly right. So like some portion of the equitable housing production and some portion of the preservation would go to first-time home buyers.
Right.
A part of those programs.
So, but in any case, if you only spend 5% on administration, then you only have 50% leeway between the 3 categories.
Mm-hmm.
That's only amount of money left. So if we are looking for flexibility, depending on this 19 jurisdictions we have in the county, that's not a lot of leeway between La Mesa versus Coronado, for example. And I think some folks may have some problems with that because of the vast difference between the needs of the 2 cities. So to me, we may want to reduce those minimums a bit to provide more flexibility. Particularly, you know, if this program continues for many years, which I hope, one jurisdiction might say, well, you know, I want to invest a lot in this category, but I might go on differently, you know, 2 or 3 years from now, after we've done adequate funding of that particular category. So I think the flexibility is very helpful in that it does give the jurisdiction a chance to even emphasize one category for a while, and they can go back to the other when they need to. But in just doing the math, it seems like there's not a lot of flexibility here, particularly given the diversity of cities we have in the region.
Thank you, Councilmember Shu. Okay, seeing no additional hands, can we go to the next slide?
Yep, so we're now going to look at the regional pots. Okay, so the regional pot's a little bit different, and I just want to point out the major difference here is in the middle of this deck, this graph, is the 15% for strategic priorities and innovation, so that we have that kind of flexibility for whatever you all feel are the most pertinent needs at the moment in time as this program unfolds. So here, the minimum on the production side dropped from 60% at the local level to 50% at the regional level, 15% for preservation, 15% for strategic priorities and innovation, 5%, this is unique only to the regional pot, for TA, research and policy development, data collection and analysis, and 5% at the regional level for the tenant and rental protection programs. Same overlay, 10 to 35% on home buyer programs. Chair, do you want to provide some context before we look at the task force comments?
I think the only thing to note was I'm personally really supportive of the strategic priorities and innovation bucket. I think there's a lot of comments that came up that I thought were really interesting. It's like, on new kinds of ways of doing construction. You know, it just seemed like there were a lot of creative ideas out there that didn't fit really well in a box. And I thought that was great to like preserve flexibility for the SD Reef board to be able to see some of those great ideas, even if they don't fit into a box.
Okay, let's just.
Could I add, Supervisor, just that, you know, to Councilmember Shu's earlier comment about, say, an equity type of lens or overlay program. And, you know, we talked about a modular housing emphasis in this subcommittee at a previous meeting. So those are the types of, you can imagine lots of different specific subpopulations and initiatives that could be provided for at a regional level with that category.
Yep.
Okay, let's just quickly go to the gradients. Again, you can see distribution between strongly agree, 7, the majority agreeing with reservations, and about a third neutral or abstaining, no disagreement or strongly disagree. And on the comments, and Jeff, I'll let you, when I'm done, just respond maybe the first one, but you know, what does equitable mean? Does it include environmental sustainability? Comments on the technical assistance. On one hand, we should comments that we should put more into technical assistance so we can focus on innovative ways to drive down cost to build. And on the other hand, folks feeling like we've got so much technical assistance money coming from the state, but we don't have enough capital. But also a comment in there was that the REAP and LEAP technical assistance money will run out in a few years. So that's a short-term TA pot. On the home ownership programs, just again, comments about should we go above the 120%, and there were conversations around 135%, but I thought that 150 was too high. So let's, Stacy, go back to the slide for discussion. Back to you, Chairwoman.
Great. Other comments, questions, or thoughts?
I believe Jack Shu's hand is raised, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, it's the same comment from the last one. I did the math again, and there's not a lot of flexibility once you add up all the minimums. And if you add 5% for administration operations, there's not a lot of room for movement from one pot to another. And to me, that's a bit of concern. You may want more money in strategic priorities and innovation, but you really don't have another pot of money to put in there.
Councilmember Shu, what would you like if you were going to put these numbers up to kind of create that flexibility? What would that look like for you?
I would reduce the minimums a bit across the board. So you still have all the categories as well as some prioritization, but it gives you a larger pot of money to move into one of the other categories. So right now you can only move 5%. So no matter how much you want to emphasize one of these categories, you can only do it by 5%. And that's with a very low amount in administration. So that's not a lot of flexibility. If you can only move 5% of your money, and I don't know if that's called flexibility, if you can move 10, 15, 20% of your money from one pot to another or divide it up between two categories, then that gives you some flexibility.
So would it be appropriate, Jen, for me to ask you all to sort of take a look at what Councilmember Shu suggested and keep our same priorities and our same pots, you know, really the same kind of focus, but see if there's a way to not tweak things hugely, but just create a little additional flexibility in line with his comments?
Yeah, totally appropriate. And I think what would be helpful just for you all to comment on, you know, the two big buckets, right, that you could add the flexibility in would be to reduce the minimum on production or to reduce the minimum on preservation. And I'm going to guess there's a lot of sensitivity around reducing the production bucket, but I think those are the two big buckets, right? And so I guess I would put it back to all of you maybe to provide a little commentary on what that would mean in terms of trade-offs there. And I know we got more folks in the queue, so maybe as you add your comments, you also could lead in a little on sharing your thoughts on that.
Okay, that sounds great. Mayor Huebner?
Yeah, first is a question. What AMI are we using? Are we using region-wide or by zip code?
Jeff, I'm going to correct me if I'm wrong, but when we get to the allocations, we're looking at basically a range of about 20 to 40% at 0 to 50%, 51 to 80, and 80 to 120. And I believe that we're just using the income bands across the county, that they wouldn't be customized to the cities. Is that right, Jeff?
Right. Yeah, there'll be another slide, Mayor Huebner, about the affordability, but that's right. We would use the the HUD basis for AMIs, which is set at the metro area, which is the county.
Okay, and those were just increased, I understand, right?
Mhm.
And so is the number that I heard the number 114,000, is that for a family of what, 2 or 4? Do you know, Jeff?
I'd have to look that up right
Okay,
now.
I'm kind of
So,
curious what that would be.
it looks like the
because-
2022 is 100. The median income is 106,900. I think that's probably for a family of 4, is what I'm guessing. I'd have to, let me just take a look at that.
I think Jeff is right. That accords with my recollection, but maybe Jeff, you can look while we have together.
Okay, and in terms of the flexibility on this, I really like to just emphasize actually getting housing built and preserved. Those are the two that I would like to see not be reduced. And I don't exactly know what strategic priorities and innovation means. And I'm not exactly sure what research and policy development, data collection, analysis, what are we going to get for that? And is it, I don't want just a bunch of reports. I want to see people with roofs over their heads. So those are the ones that I would definitely be reducing.
Thank you. Mayor Gloria.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, first off, I want to respect your mention before about strategic priorities and initiatives. Like Mayor Huebner, vague to me, but I know as our leader, you're spending a lot of time on this, and definitely defer to the vision that you have. On that end of things, on the 120% AMI, I don't know about you all, but I'll just give vocalization to the number of people in my city who make that and more and still struggle. And I worry about closing any doors to particularly working and middle class families. My belief of that figure would be that'd be like 2 people making roughly $50,000 a year, not uncommon in the city. And I know it's hard for people to appreciate the inflationary pressures that we have. I recently got static for a affordable housing complex that it was like $1,800 a month for the unit. People pulling their hair out, but I think they recognize the median rent is like $2,400 a month, right? So just updating our notions of what is affordable, what is not. I know there's a lot of people struggling in the middle, and particularly for things that may require public participation in terms of votes and things of that nature. I think it might behoove us to just be sensitive to the missing middle and the folks who really are working hard in this city, this region, but don't see a future for themselves here.
Thank you. I think we had one additional comment. Is Mayor Salis's hand, is it still up?
Hey, it's still up.
Okay, please.
All right. Gracias. So I would echo the sentiments of my colleagues. The missing middle, yes, we need to make sure that as we're talking about equitable housing production, how we allocate our numbers and well, just making sure that the AMI is relevant and that we're adjusting to that, as well as the production and preservation. I mean, that's where we got to go. Just build it, and we got to push it. I mean, it just has to be done. So production and preservation is something that I will also support. And again, with the innovation part of it, I was, curious, to learn a little bit more, and if that is like to put it towards multimodal transportation corridors, or how things are built. I'd be interested to learn more there as well. Thanks, Chair.
Could I, speak to that, Supervisor. Just there seems to be a little bit of confusion about the strategic priorities. I think that the best way to think about it is just that's money that's set aside for priorities that bubble up, from the board and from the region. So it could be used for capital. It could be used for to develop affordable housing, green it's as priorities evolve from the board. So I think that is actually sort of a set aside that can be flexible.
Yeah, I'll speak to that a little as well. I think part of my thinking on that is we're at a current moment in time, and I think we have a lot of understanding of what our problems are, but there will be like elected officials who come after us or future incarnations of ourselves that see a different set of challenges, as well as sort of a different set of opportunities. And I thought it would be useful. I think it is important to be able to sort of kind of respond to the moment. We're trying to set up an agency that's going to be around for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And I don't, being able to evolve and say, this is a priority that's emerged. It could be an equity priority, but I think what I got excited about in our last meeting was the discussion of modular and sort of how do you scale modular. And that to me would go in that bucket. Like what might you want to do to like invest in sort of green modular housing that's also creating good jobs for working folks here in our region, but doesn't necessarily fit cleanly in any of the other buckets. So that if I'm still around when we're running a STREEF, I'll probably want to do some work on modular. I think Councilmember Shu is probably want to put a lot of it towards equity. So I can imagine that there'd be lots of different ways to think about how to allocate those resources. So that's how I would answer that. So Mayor Huebner?
Just a quick question. So if there's $100, so are you saying that a jurisdiction gets this is the region gets $100, and according to this graph, a minimum $50 has to go to equitable housing production, a minimum 15 goes to, and so forth? Or
Yep.
can you, okay, so you have to divide your $100 in each of these pots, but so then I guess you're going to have to build up pots because one pot may not have enough to do anything.
Mayor Huebner, I think using your city as a great example, you have your bucket, right, of production dollars, and you have your bucket of preservation dollars. And because your population is smaller, your allocation might be smaller at your city allocation. This is the regional allocation that might be 1 year to put some more production money into your city, right? Because you might have a project that comes every few years, and then in a different year, put production dollars into another small city. So this money is supplemental to the city pots.
We don't have a lot in our city pots. We don't have a pot for preservation. We just have a pot for, so yeah.
You do have in the local jurisdiction box, there was 60% of the dollars to the
and the other, and on this program.
Right.
Okay,
So all I'm saying is these two pots of money are additive.
Yeah.
These are additive to your budgets, right? This is where we think regionally together, right? You as the decision makers, and year over year, you'll be able to say, this year we're going to support that project in Solana Beach, and next year we're going to support that project in National City because those jurisdictions are tiny.
Now I understand. Okay, so you were referring to the previous pot of the other 50%. All right. So okay, all right. So it seems like we are going to be saving up our dollars to get anything done, especially those of us who are smaller cities.
Chair, I think we have comments from Council Member Shu, and then we'll likely be done with this one and we can move forward.
Great. Councilmember Shu.
Thank you. I was trying to make some real quick comments in support of strategic priorities and innovation, as well as research and policy development. I'm just reminded that the Ford Foundation spends, 40% up to 60% of their grant money on research and data collection and trying to build or develop better programs for the ultimate mission of the Ford Foundation. So I think in government, we have a problem in that we just keep on doing what we've done before and we don't measure it and we think we're doing fine. So I like the idea that we are going to do some allocations, forcing government to do some strategic priorities, to look at our data, and see if we could do our job better. And in that regard, that money can also essentially be helping equitable housing production as well as preservation. So to me, it's not a necessarily different category as much as commenting on when you're dealing with equitable housing preservation and production, that you do think at least of doing that innovative and doing it the best way and collecting the data to make sure we do it better. And I think that's what those two categories, to me, that's what they mean to me. So great. I hope we all do that, and we should be doing that anyway, but having it in these categories helps, I think, push the program in that direction.
So I want to move us to the next, last big piece of the agenda, which is the programmatic criteria. We're going to probably run out of time, but we're going to start with affordability and then sustainability and livability. And if we just get through the affordability today, that's fine. That's where we're going to talk about the income ranges. But I just want to recap what I really hear from this, because I think this was very helpful from the chair, an invitation back to the staffing team to think a little bit about the allocations from all of you on the subcommittee. Definitely like the production and preservation buckets. I see a low-hanging opportunity maybe to pull the rental assistance out of your local buckets and put it in the regional bucket to give you more flexibility there. And I hear all of you saying, yes, want a little more flexibility. The 5-10% isn't enough. So we hear you, and we'll definitely rework that and come back. So let's move to the last kind of big bucket. And again, if we just get through affordability today, that's okay. If we get all the way through, it's good. But so affordability is where we're going to talk about the income distribution. Let's go to that slide. So here, these again are the programmatic criteria of the program. The idea, and these ranges I think you'll like better, are a little more flexible, but of the funding, 20 to 40% will target, this is the production and preservation monies, 20 to 40% would target 0 to 50, 20 to 40% would target 50 to 80, and 20 to 40 would target 80 to 100. And then again, the same overlay on home ownership up to 120%. And presumably this would actually be the same distribution on the rental assistance as well. Chairwoman, let you provide context, you and Jeff, and then I can walk through the feedback from the committee.
Honestly, I feel like this is pretty clear. So go, and I do hope we can get through the other two pieces, which were actually the sustainability one is the most interesting.
Okay.
So I think we can get through that.
Let me power through then. Let's just go look at the distribution. Oh, this was another part of it, just that as part of the income distribution, we would also prioritize projects that leverage state and local funds. Reflection that those, which are rental projects, are often at or below 80%, and also prioritize mixed income projects that incorporate multiple income tiers, which really enables, as some of you have mentioned, the ability and prioritizing getting to the middle income households as well. So let's look at the feedback then on that. That whole list together, you can see very strong, almost a third in agreement, full agreement, strong agreement, 60% with some reservations, and the rest at neutral or abstain. So in general, trending in the right direction. And let's go to the feedback, because it was pretty specific. The biggest part of the feedback is right here, that there was a feeling that we should go a little more in the 0 to 50% bucket. So we took 5% off the moderate income bucket and moved it to the low income bucket, so that range 0 to 50 could be 20 to 45% of the money, keeping the 20 to 40% the same for the 80% AMI band, and then just reducing the top amount that could go to middle income housing by 5%. Some comments, but not consensus, but just some comments that maybe we should prioritize projects that are shovel ready, and then a strong set of voices around this financing should go for projects in the early stages, not waiting for later stage financing commitments, but this should be the early capital in. We'll go back to the discussion slide.
Great. Any thoughts or comments? Questions?
Just real fast, Chair. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so that one, projects that leverage state and federal funds. That one, the only comment I have about that is often those are limited to cost per unit. And so those of us in high land value cities are often left out of those. So we're not able to get any of those. We experience not getting county funds especially. So I don't know if we can maybe put a lighter weight on that or put a higher weight on shovel ready, which we have. So that's my input.
Can I let me build on that actually, Mayor Huebner. I have a question for staff team. These would be program like criteria, but in any case, the local jurisdictions would still be getting their allocation. So if within a local jurisdiction that's not feasible, like the projects that leverage state and federal funds, they would still be able to design their projects in a way that makes sense for their own jurisdiction. Is that correct?
Do you want me to speak?
Sure.
I could speak to a little bit of the intent actually. Maybe that'd be helpful because this is a little cryptic otherwise. So there was some of the early discussions around mixed income projects being important. So projects that hit that missing middle, or have a mix of affordable units and missing middle units, and wanting to uplift those types of projects. But as you all know, if you want to go get tax credits, TCAC, LIHTC, tax exempt bonds, you really are looking at 80% AMI and below only. So if you try to uplift mixed income and you put a priority for that, you're not gonna end up prioritizing projects that are going for state and federal funding. So this is a little bit trying to make sure we're getting both of those. That's a little bit the intent. I'm not, I still hear your comment, Mayor Huebner.
Councilmember Shu.
Sure, I'm in favor of increasing the pot for the 0 to 50 by that 5%. One of my constituents told me one time, there's no shortage of housing for those who have money. And I think the real shortage, what's driving our homeless population is that category, the ones that can only afford a very small amount for housing, like as low as $800 a month. And so I think that's will help our communities the most. I have one other concern is if we're going to help someone buy a home with additional money, what's our protection from that program itself driving the cost of homes even higher? In other words, there was talk of giving a discount on gas prices in this recent gas price increase. That might just help the gas production folks just keep the price higher even longer, or even have it go up higher, rather than reducing the overall cost of gasoline.
Oh, I think that's a great question, Councilmember Shu, really insightful. So let me answer sort of my view on how I anticipate this being utilized, because I think that is a very insightful question. I think that what I'm anticipating, this is going to be used for housing production. So it's not going to drive up the cost by subsidizing people in the existing market. It's actually going to increase the supply of homes and making those or help with preservation of existing units so they don't become sort of gentrified and therefore more expensive. And then they would be deed restricted. And they would be deed restricted over 30 years or 50 years or something like that. So that a first-time home buyer would still be able to capture some appreciation, but it's not like it immediately goes to the market value. So, right, if let's say you capped it at 5% appreciation a year, that would still be a very healthy return on someone's investment in terms of like accruing capital, right? If you had 20% down and then you have a 5% appreciation a year, you're basically at a 20% return on your investment in your house. So that's great. but it's still keeping the home stock like way under market. So you're essentially going to be creating a whole bunch of housing stock that is at a different, market tier that's under market value. And my hope would actually, by building more housing and providing some purchase housing for sale that's significantly below the like absurd market, that it actually might help kind of anchor costs a little lower. But I actually thought that was an incredibly insightful question, because you could totally see how it could go completely awry if you're just sort of like artificially pumping up, capital availability.
Great, thank you.
I'm obviously very passionate about this first-time home buyer piece. I think, of course, it's a huge issue for folks in my district. So probably where I've given a lot of thought on how to make this piece work. Yeah. Do we have any other comments? I'm looking.
Mayor Sotelo Solis got her hand up.
Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Gracias, Chair. And I too agree with the bumps for those under 80 and the 50. I think, just recognizing those first-time home buyer programs are essential. We really need to create home ownership opportunities. And like I shared, we have a 70-30 split. So it's really about having housing stock, whether it be older housing stock that is up to par to be sold, as well as newer housing stock that, gets them started with the condo and maybe upgrade to single family homes. But those types of opportunities, I think, will present itself with the 5 to broken down. And I agree, we need deed restrictions, and we need very specific language that you will not have the opportunity to, sell it for higher, at least for another 50 to 100 years. And however we can write it into these dollars. And I don't know if in the other finance agencies, they actually have it as part of any contracts, or how they make sure that people understand that. Where's the checks and balance there?
Well, for the others, two pieces of ledge, they really didn't focus. They didn't call out first-time home ownership as a focus area, and they didn't call it missing middle. They capped theirs at 80% AMI. So this reflects, I think, some tailoring to the San Diego context.
Yeah,
but we did the current ledge actually does, and I'm happy to follow up with some language, but it includes language in the definition section around first-time home ownership, and calls out that deed restriction and that limitation on appreciation.
Great.
Jeff, do you think you could just send that to Mayor Sotelo Solis so you can take a look?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mayor Gloria, did you have any additional thoughts? Okay, great. Mayor Huebner.
Yeah, real fast. I've been seeing that it's very difficult to realize for sale deed restricted homes. And so I'm hoping that this task force has some input on what are the obstacles to that. It's just not happening. I also appreciate Councilmember Shu's concept about, making sure that nothing that we do drives housing prices up, and that what we're seeing is that when we're relying on the private market to subsidize the inclusionary portion of our projects, what they do is they raise the market rate prices for the market rate units, and all comparables are then based on those most recent market rate rents. And so that's what's driving it up. When we do have extra money like this, government money, subsidized money, then that I think does help to stabilize the market, rather than forcing for-profit developers to somehow absorb that. I think it would help.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Not seeing any further comments. Can we move to the next slide?
So we have 18 minutes and just two pieces left. So I think we can do this. Jeff is going to actually walk through the two final areas, sustainability and livability. I'll share the comments, but Jeff, I'm going to let you present the slides.
Okay, sure. So this first,
Jeff, before you start, if everyone wouldn't mind, since we have only two left, why don't you power through both sections so that we do have the opportunity to all see the information.
Okay.
Great.
And Jeff, go ahead and present the comments too, so it's just really fluid.
Okay, we'll just roll through it. Okay, so this next section is sustainability, and we'll do livability last. So with sustainability, we had a great conversation last subcommittee around these principles. And this, what you're seeing here, is that next effort to try to articulate it with a level of specificity. And so what you see here, you see there's 4 pillars here. What we did is we really worked with Hueso's office to look at existing language. So we are not recreating the wheel, and we're aligning with other programs that developers, and especially affordable housing developers, are already familiar with. So near good transit, this language is really about what a good transit stop is. And in fact, I would suggest maybe not to get too caught up in the exact language. I'm just letting you know that it comes from TCAC, the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program. So it's near good transit. It's in VMT efficient areas. For new construction, this 3rd pillar, it's to have on-site renewable energy. And the 4th pillar is around native landscaping and other low water use landscaping priorities and practices. And then if you can go to the following slide, Stacy, this one is for rehab, and it's around energy efficiency. There's a 10% post-rehab improvement on existing conditions in terms of energy efficiency. And again, these are priorities currently in the state affordable housing TCAC program. And we're taking that and borrowing it here and saying these are going to be our parameters for our sustainability parameters. Can you go back, Stacy, and just actually, so it's near good transit. I'm going to reiterate: near good transit, VMT efficient areas. For new construction, it's to have 50% on-site renewable energy and native landscaping. And then for rehab, it's improved energy efficiency, 10%. And following, so here's the gradients of agreement. We got quite a bit of on agreement with reservations. And then there was a smattering of 3s and 4s and 5s as well. And I think the next one I'll talk about the comments.
Jeff, can I just add to, this was the only place that we got 4s and 5s. And it has everything to do with the single issue that Jeff's going to share around electrification. So go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's exactly it. There was a very robust discussion about all electric being a requirement, whether it should be a requirement or whether that was getting too far ahead of the issue. And so you could see some of the comments here around support for electrification, that it's a necessity, that it's not just a priority. And others felt that while that is the direction things are moving, that it was moving too fast to box ourselves in to say it's a requirement, and calling for more flexibility. So that was an area of really robust conversation, and we expect to have more conversation on that when we go back to the task force. And I'll just keep powering through to livability. So livability, what do we mean by livability? Last time at this subcommittee, we talked a lot about the importance of living in great communities and not just building, 4 walls and a roof and calling it a day. And the importance of living in mixed income, mixed use, walkable communities that are age friendly and have access to like important resources like grocery stores and pharmacies and playgrounds and schools. I remember Mayor Solis, you spoke about this quite a bit. And so what we thought about that and try to articulate that and develop a set of priorities around that. And so what you see here is a proposal to have basically 2 options. Option 1 would be if you build a mixed use project that has on-site amenities that really encourage this type of livable environment and great community. And option 2 is maybe you don't build a mixed use project that actually has it on site, but you're located really close to all that good stuff. So you're close to commercial corridors, or you're close to a grocery store and close to a pharmacy, et cetera. So I'll tackle each one of those separately. Again, option 1 is you build it on site. And so the idea here is, first of all, you're in a place that it makes sense to build it on site, not kind of in the middle of nowhere. So you're close to a good transit stop where you're more likely to be walkable. and that you have a certain density, meaning you have a certain, size project that you could support this type of on-site amenity. And then the third one is kind of the key one, is that you actually have on-site amenities and neighborhood serving retail and services. Everyone knows how important it is, and what amazing amenity if you can have, a doctor's clinic or something, on site. So that's option one. You actually have it on site. And option two is you're located really close to the good stuff. And we thought initially we had a big list of all the good stuff, and all this good stuff we pulled out of TCAC again. These are all priorities that exist currently in TCAC program. And so developers are very familiar with these. But we decided to maybe tier them out, because some of them are really important and some of them, it's hard to weight them exactly the same. So here, the more important amenities we felt were public parks and community centers, grocery stores, commercial corridors, and schools. And then next slide, tier 2 amenities is medical clinics, public libraries, pharmacies, childcare, and senior centers. And we're just identifying that there's, important stuff and, additionally important stuff, tier 1, tier 2. And we're not going to get into at this point, what the point criteria would be. I think that would be for a later date for the program people to develop down the line. Next slide. And that, I think we should actually stop there before we get to this slide, and take conversation about livability and sustainability.
Great. Okay, I think I have a hard stop at 2:59, so we have about 10 minutes left, and we have at least one public comment left. So if I can ask folks to be really kind of succinct in your comments and thoughts, and then we'll have the public comment, and then we will adjourn. So Mayor Huebner.
Be very succinct. So number one, on electrification, my city did that already, and it has to be cost effective for it to be part of your REACH codes. So that's one thing that they might want to know. We also exempted cooking appliances, which makes it more acceptable to many people. Just an idea for that. In terms of the near good transit, the definition of transit, I think that needs a lot of thought, for especially focusing on the very low and low income. Peak hours of transit just don't apply. Many of those people don't have 9-to-5 jobs. Most of them, for instance, many are restaurant jobs, they're entertainment jobs, they're retail jobs, and those are not in peak hours. Also, it says 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. They don't come and go from the same city. The topography makes a difference. If it's located 1.5 miles, in some areas it might be walkable, in some areas it might not be walkable. And then the greater than 25 dwelling units an acre, the small cities have a 20 dwelling units an acre maximum. Kicking it up adds an additional story, and that's where you get into the problems like we see in Encinitas, and all of the problems they're having with rejecting any density because of that particular issue. But overall, my comment on this is that these are very specific, and maybe instead of putting them into this, it should be done at the authority level whenever we get to that governance the next time. This specificity doesn't seem to allow a lot of flexibility, and it could be problematic. And I would rather, I think, see us dive deeper at another level. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shu.
I'll also be real quick. I'm really want to get us away from doing miles of close to public transit and rather use 15 or 20-minute walk. The distance thing is obsolete, and we need planners to stop thinking about that. You can Google a 15-minute walk. I don't want to use a straight compass, because you can have a development next to a freeway, and the bus stop is on other freeway, but the walk is actually a 30-minute walk. So the distance thing is no longer valid. And we could do that across the board. And similarly, with Mayor Huebner's comment, transportation is changing. We should be able to have on-demand public transportation 24 hours. So bus stops and bus routes and all that stuff should be obsolete in the near future. And if we really do it right, it should be obsolete next year. And lastly, renewable energy. These units should be all electric because it is really cost effective, and we should be in renewable energy certainly by 2030. So I think we could put some timelines on it and borrow from climate action plans, at least the newer climate action plans, not the ones that were written 5 years ago. And because that's where we're going towards, and renewable energy. My city's, we're on community choice. We 100% renewable energy is available to us now, and it's also available to us through SDG&E as well. So I think we can build all those things in to the program. There might be some other broader way to explain all the sustainability parameters. And it may be tied to the climate action plans of the jurisdictions. That may be another way to get to this language without getting into details and allowing for the flexibility that Mayor Huebner just alluded to. The problem is not all cities have climate action plans or good ones. In fact, most of them are pretty bad.
I'd love to call on Mayor Satella Solis, and then we could move on to our last public comment.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I loved what Jack just said. Well, not that they're all horrible, but that I think we all have work to do. And that I think if we couch it in everyone helping to reach their climate action goals, that makes it the selling point. The sustainability part then, feeds two birds with one seed, and really getting to where we need to get. So totally echo that sentiment. And the distance part, you guys got for me, the elements that were essential, and it's that 10-minute walkable community. Because as Mayor Huebner mentioned, some are hilly, some are definitely around various very densely trafficked communities, so it's not very walkable. So all of those to say, I think you guys captured the elements there fairly well, but I think we should also too just connect it to our climate action plans. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought that was some great comments from everyone, and I'd love to ask Jen and staff to kind of think about how we could take those comments into account, particularly on the near good transit. Although Jack seems to be willing to walk 20 minutes and Mayor Satella Solis only wants to walk 10. So, but I do think we had some great comments, and I think all three of those comments kind of had a similar thrust on being more thoughtful on what do we really mean by near good transit. Mayor, Councilmember Shu, I'll walk 30. No, so we gotta.
I walk uphill though. I'm gonna walk uphill.
In the snow.
In the snow, both ways in the snow. Well, with that, honestly, this is just I love this meeting. I love this group. It is so fantastic. Just feel like we'd make such great progress, and everyone has fabulous ideas. And I'm just excited to give our staff team all this input to work on and chew on and come back to us with some. It sounds like most of it, everyone feels pretty good about it, but we had some really good targeted comments on a few pieces. So look forward to that. Francesca, is there a public comment?
Thank you, Chair. We do have two public comments, actually. First, it'll be Cathy Rhodes, who will be followed by Tim Bailish. And Cathy, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much for this great presentation and conversations. And of course, I agree with all Council Member Shu's comments. And so some questions, will Sandag, are they going to be creating, pre-approved design and cost estimates for a variety of types of ADUs, and a variety of costs that people could, use throughout the country? And then for SB 1105, if you could ask Senator Hueso to allow Sandag to put forth special taxes like sales tax or transit occupancy taxes instead of only parcel taxes or business taxes on future ballots to fund this equitable housing program. And I actually have a proposed TOT tax that could potentially be used, and that's located at tinyurl.com/2022-03114A. And then August 12th, 2022 is the last day for Sandag to file with the Register of Voters if you want to put something on the November 2022 election in 3.5 months. So my questions are, when is SB 1105 be expected to be signed? And are there any plans for Sandag to put any type of tax onto this ballot? And when do you expect money to start coming into this fund? Thank you so much.
Thank you. And next we'll have Tim Bilish. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Thank you for this discussion. I appreciate being here. I feel inadequate to understand some of these issues. It's really, I appreciate and encourage the group's discussions. I've really appreciated it. I also appreciate Councilmember Jack Shu's last comments as kind of a grocery list and very insightful and things to look at. One item I would like to better understand is how much is the government's role in creating housing equity that is investment return and to build monetary equity versus providing adequate housing at the moment or in continuity so that people can live and work here, or access to opportunities that they wouldn't have because of their proximity to these locations. The second thing I would be thinking about is, and I don't understand, are these ADU units a way to afford staying in housing in San Diego by essentially bringing in family members from out of state so that it stays affordable as pricing goes up? Or is it a means to provide for parents who might be either in state or out of state at some distance because the parents are going to be struggling with those issues? Thank you once again, and I appreciate the committee continuing their work.
Great. Well, with those, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just going to tell you that was all the public comments.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.